My name is Alexis Monroe, and for 30 years, I served as a Major General in the United States Army. I led special operations teams through war zones the world will never acknowledge, saved lives that never made the news, and bore consequences no one ever cared to ask about. I never expected medals. I never needed applause. But last Sunday, I stood behind a fence, uninvited, as my family celebrated the Monroe military legacy without me. They said I failed. My father sat in the front row, polished medals gleaming beneath his old colonel's blazer. My brother, now a decorated naval officer, stood proudly at the podium. My niece gave a stirring speech about honor and tradition. They called themselves descendants of valor, a family line of unbroken service. But when I asked, just to attend quietly, no speech, no spotlight, they refused. They said, "You disobeyed orders." They said, "You brought shame." They said, "You are not welcome." So I stood there in silence, on the other side of the chain-link fence, wearing jeans and a navy blue button-down, watching the ceremony unfold like I'd never been a part of it at all. My name was nowhere on the program, not under honorees, not in the acknowledgments, not even in the footnotes. And then, something happened. 5 minutes into the ceremony, the air changed. It wasn't music, it was vibration, ground shaking, familiar. 20 military Humvees rolled into view, engines roaring like a storm rolling in from memory. They moved in formation, tight, exact. Dust rose behind them like a curtain pulled back on truth. 200 soldiers stepped out in synchronized rows, silent, purposeful. Then the black SUV pulled up. When the door opened, I recognized him instantly. General Jonathan Reese, 4 stars on each shoulder. A man I hadn't seen since the day he approved the decision that ended my career. He walked past my family, past the podium, past the crowd, until he stood right in front of me, outside the fence. Then, in front of everyone, he raised his hand and saluted. "Welcome back, Major General Alexis Monroe." The crowd fell silent, and just like that, the name they tried to erase echoed across the field like thunder. Growing up in the Monroe household meant you didn't choose military service, you inherited it. The walls of our home weren't decorated with landscapes or family vacations. They were covered in framed portraits of uniforms, sepia photos of great uncles from World War II, cousins from Desert Storm, my brother in his academy dress blues, chin tilted with pride. And for a while, my face was up there too. There was a photo of me, second lieutenant at 22, jaw set, eyes forward, cap squared. My father had it framed and hung just to the right of my brother's, lower as he used to joke, because rank goes left to right, oldest to youngest. But I didn't mind. For a long time, that wall was proof I belonged. It stayed there until Iraq 2008. After that mission, my photo disappeared. No announcement, no dramatic confrontation, just gone. I noticed the first time I came home on leave. In its place hung a watercolor of an American eagle. My father didn't say a word, neither did my mother. They acted like it had always been that way. My brother Ben was less subtle. Months later, during dinner, he looked at me across a plate of overcooked pot roast and said, "You know why it's not up there anymore, right? You broke protocol. You went off script. That's not bravery, Lex. That's recklessness." He didn't say it like a brother. He said it like a man reading from a code of conduct manual, as if I hadn't trained him to shoot when he was 15, as if I hadn't deferred a promotion so he could get a slot at the Naval Academy. He stared at me like I was some case study in what not to become. From then on, I wasn't Alexis Monroe, Army General. I was Alexis, the family's footnote. I remember the last dinner I attended at our family home. It was Thanksgiving, years after the scandal. My niece had gone all out. Handwritten name cards, crystal water glasses, cloth napkins folded into fans. Everyone's card had their title. Captain Ben Monroe, Dr. Lila Monroe, even Ensign Rachel Monroe, who had just finished boot camp. Mine? Just Alexis. No rank, no title, no acknowledgement. I was seated at the far end of the table, next to the coat stand and an empty chair usually reserved for the dog. My father didn't speak to me once, not when I passed him the gravy, not when I poured my own glass of wine. He asked about deployments, medical school, commissions. When it came to me, he shifted in his seat like I was static he could tune out. Midway through dinner, someone raised a toast to those who've served with distinction. Glasses clinked, and all eyes turned to Ben. I raised mine too, quietly, unnoticed. It was like applauding at a movie no one else was watching. After dessert, apple pie, the one I always used to bake, I stayed behind to clean. Old habit. My mother used to say, "You can always tell who was raised with honor by who stays to do the dishes." No one joined me that night. I washed every plate by hand while voices drifted from the next room. When I said I was heading out, Ben barely looked up. "Thanks for coming," he said. No hug, no walk to the door. As I passed my father, I paused. Not for a goodbye, just instinct. He shifted his body away from me. Not dramatically, just enough to let me know. Even your shadow isn't welcome here. No one called afterward, no text, no follow-up. When my cousin Rachel got married the next spring, I found out through a tagged photo on Facebook. When Ben's first child was born, I learned about it from a VA nurse in Colorado who mentioned it offhand. That's how I became a ghost. Not absent, just erased. I used to think silence was safer than explaining. That if I just stayed quiet, one day someone might ask, "What really happened?" But they never did. And so, my story faded. One photo removed, one chair pushed aside, one dinner skipped, until there was nothing left but a name they used to say with pride, now whispered like a cautionary tale. It was supposed to be a routine sweep. Iraq, 2008. Operation Nightshade. My unit had boots on the ground near a compound outside Mosul. Satellite intel suggested it was a weapons depot, possibly a front for arms smuggling tied to regional militias. The mission profile was clear. Confirm intel, secure perimeter, await extraction by sundown. But intel lies. And that building wasn't a depot. There were no crates of rifles, no ammunition. What we found instead were children. 37 of them, malnourished, drugged, terrified. Some were locked in rooms no bigger than closets. Others were huddled in a basement that reeked of blood and fear. It wasn't just a safe house. It was a holding pen. A grotesque human shield operation run by warlords who knew how to manipulate Western rules of engagement. Children made things complicated. Children delayed strikes. Children bought time. I radioed it in, used the correct protocol. Compound compromised. Civilian miners confirmed. Request emergency evac. The response was clinical. Hold position. Await further instruction. But I knew what that meant. When responses are slow, it's not because someone is unsure, it's because someone at a higher desk doesn't want to respond. We learned later the location had political entanglements. The area was under shadow protection from a faction tied to one of our so-called allies. The State Department had brokered a non-intervention arrangement in exchange for access to energy corridor intel. In other words, we weren't supposed to be there. And if something went wrong, no one would come. We had 20 minutes before the compound would be overrun. I had a choice. Wait for an order that wouldn't arrive or act on the oath I took. Not to politics, but to human life. I chose to act. We split into 2 teams. One would hold the exits. The other, mine, would extract the children. No formation, no clearance. Just speed and precision. We moved through darkness and dust, clearing booby-trapped doors, dodging sniper fire from rooftops disguised as homes. I can still hear the pop of each bullet in the air, how the children flinched before they even heard the sound. 3 of my soldiers were injured that night. One took shrapnel to the thigh, another had a fractured clavicle. But every child, every single one made it out. We loaded them into troop transports, wrapped them in jackets, gave them water, whispered names they could barely repeat. One little girl wouldn't let go of my hand the entire ride. She was maybe 5. Her knuckles turned white from holding on so tight. By the time we reached the fallback point, I had already filed the after-action report. I told the truth, every brutal, unredacted detail. No sugarcoating, no spin. And then, nothing. No reprimand, no commendation, just silence. The report was classified within 24 hours. 2 weeks later, I received a formal letter, conduct review initiated for deviation from command protocol. I didn't fight it. I didn't go public. Because if I had, those kids would have become headlines. Their faces would have been splashed across every news outlet, their trauma turned into spectacle. And I couldn't let that happen, so I signed the NDA. Took the demotion, took the shame. They reassigned me to a non-combat role, strategic planning and personnel briefings. Nothing classified, nothing meaningful. Slowly, my visibility shrank. Fewer calls, fewer meetings. Until one day, there was nothing left to lead. They didn't have to fire me, they just made me disappear. The hardest part wasn't the silence from command. It was the silence from home. I called my father the day I received the review notice. I didn't expect understanding, but I thought maybe he'd at least want to hear it from me. He answered on the second ring. I told him plainly what had happened. No emotion, just facts. There was a pause. Then he said, "I taught you to follow the chain of command, not rewrite it." That was all. He hung up. 2 weeks later, I found out my name had been removed from the Monroe Military Wall of Honor, the one outside his study. In its place, a brass plaque read, "Reserved for future service." As if I had died. I wish I could say my brother reached out, that he asked for my side of the story, that he even acknowledged how my absence opened a spot for his fast-tracked promotion. But he didn't. He climbed quickly, became a commander, spoke at events, shook hands, took photos beneath flags. And when people asked about his sister, he just smiled politely and moved on. That mission saved 37 children. It ended my career. And for 15 years, I lived with the silence of that trade. Not because I regretted it, I didn't. But because no one ever asked why. 15 years passed. I lived quietly on a farm just outside Red Lodge, Montana. Fenced pasture, a few goats, a stubborn barn cat named Hobbs. I grew vegetables in raised beds, fixed the roof myself every spring, replaced the porch swing with my own hands when the wood cracked under too many winters. No one from my family ever visited. Then, one September morning, a text lit up my phone. It was from my cousin Dana, short and strangely cheerful. "Hey, just FYI, Ben's organizing a Monroe family military reunion this fall. Biggest one yet, should be epic." No link, no invite, no question mark, just a warning disguised as a courtesy. I looked it up anyway. There it was, Monroe Military Legacy Celebration, honoring 3 generations of service. My brother's name was front and center on the event banner. My father's picture was in the intro paragraph. There was even a photo of Dana's husband, who'd served 2 years in a logistics base in Germany and never left the wire. I scrolled through the schedule, video tributes, medals, guest speakers, a segment called The Heroes Among Us. My name was nowhere. Not a mention, not even a misprint. At the bottom of the event page, a line in fine print read, "Due to the formal nature of this event, we kindly ask that guests refrain from inviting individuals whose military service has been subject to disciplinary action." That wasn't subtle. That was personal. I didn't cry, didn't rage, just sat at the kitchen table with the screen still glowing and the coffee going cold beside me. I wasn't surprised, not anymore. But it still hurt. Not because I wanted applause, not because I needed a seat up front, but because I knew what absence looked like and how easily it turned into myth. There would be children there, children who'd grow up believing I was never part of this family's history. That I couldn't accept, so I did something I never thought I'd do again. I filed a request with the Department of Defense to temporarily declassify a portion of Operation Nightshade, specifically 60 minutes of visibility, enough to confirm facts without revealing sensitive intel. I didn't want retribution. I didn't want to challenge anyone. I just wanted the truth to have space to exist. The process took weeks, layers of clearance, review boards, new signatures, new NDAs. I signed everything. I read every clause. I didn't tell anyone. Not Ben, not my father, not Dana. Eventually, the request was approved. 1 hour of limited declassification, on-site only, no replication, no press. That was enough. I didn't dig out my uniform. I didn't call ahead. I didn't even book a hotel. I bought a one-way train ticket, packed a single duffel, and stayed at a motel off Route 212. The night before the event, I stood across the street from the park where the ceremony would take place. I watched the stage go up, the flags get hung, the seating chart taped to the gate. No one recognized me, and I preferred it that way. The next morning, I dressed in clean jeans and a navy button-down. No insignia, no pins, just me. At the gate, a young soldier scanned the guest list. "Name, ma'am?" "Alexis Monroe," I said quietly. He flipped pages, paused. "I'm sorry, you're not on the list." "I know," I replied. "I'm not asking for a seat, just to stand in the back. I won't interrupt." He hesitated, then gave a rehearsed apology. "I've been instructed not to allow entry to unregistered individuals. I'm really sorry." I nodded. "No problem." I stepped aside and found a quiet spot near the fence, behind the seating area. From there, I could see the whole field. The stage, the podium, my father's straight-backed posture, my brother's practiced smile. I wasn't there to be seen, I was there to witness, because even if they erased my name, I was still part of the story. The first rumble came as my brother approached the microphone. It was subtle at first, just enough vibration to make the paper programs flutter in people's laps. Someone looked toward the street, confused. Then came the sound of engines. Not parade floats, not ceremonial jeeps. Military engines, tactical diesels. I didn't move. I knew that sound. 20 Humvees turned the corner in tight formation, American flags mounted on each flank, dust rising behind them like memory made visible. Their presence wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. Each vehicle moved with purpose. No music, no waving, just steel and silence. The crowd stilled. My brother froze mid-sentence. My father stood, his jaw set like he was trying to interpret a threat. No one understood what was happening. Except me. The Humvees surrounded the green like a silent perimeter. Then a final black SUV pulled up near the stage. Out stepped General Jonathan Reese, 4 stars on his shoulders, medals crisp on his chest. The same man who, 15 years earlier, had authorized my conduct review and sent me into bureaucratic exile. He didn't greet the mayor. He didn't look at my brother. He walked straight through the aisle, his boots thudding like punctuation. Then he stopped, in front of the fence, in front of me. And with perfect posture, he saluted. "Welcome back, Major General Alexis Monroe." The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was recognition, slow, stunned realization spreading across the crowd like light cracking through stained glass. My niece dropped her phone. A cousin whispered, "Did he say, General?" I heard my father's breath catch, saw his spine straighten instinctively. Then General Reese turned to the crowd. "For those unaware," he began, voice steady, "this woman served 33 years in the United States Army. She led operations that cannot be named, saved lives that history won't record. And when the system failed, she held the line. Then behind him, 200 soldiers, those who'd arrived in silence, raised their hands in unison and saluted. To me, a corridor of respect, of honor, of memory returned. I didn't raise my hand, not yet. Instead, I stepped forward, through a side gate quietly unlocked by someone I couldn't see. I stood tall, no medals, no uniform, just breath and spine and truth. The field wasn't silent anymore. I could hear murmurs now. General Monroe? How could they leave her out? Wasn't she? They didn't finish their sentences, because now they knew. And when I finally lifted my hand and returned the salute, it wasn't for show. It was for the children we saved, the soldiers who followed me into fire, and for the woman I had refused to let the world forget. The morning after the ceremony, I woke before sunrise. The air was still, The kind of stillness that feels like the earth hasn't decided to move yet. I brewed 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for maybe. Then I stepped onto the porch and placed a second chair beside mine. Not across from me, not like a confrontation, but beside me, as an equal, as a witness. That's when I saw it. A plain envelope tucked beneath the front doormat. No return address, just my name in familiar slanted handwriting. Inside, one sentence. If you'll allow it, I'd like to come by. Not to say sorry, just to listen. He didn't sign it. He didn't need to. I didn't write back. I didn't rush to respond. I just left the second chair where it was. Some days it sits empty. Some days it doesn't. But every morning, I pour 2 cups anyway. Not because I expect anyone, but because I know now that I exist with or without their permission. That second chair isn't for forgiveness. It's for space. And after 15 years of silence, that's more than enough.